We're live.
No, it's preparing. Hold on.
Oh, okay.
It's working better than Facebook already.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So we're talking 20% of protection. Hello. Yeah.
All right, I think we're live. Let me double check. Yep, we're good.
All right. Fantastic.
Sorry, there was a little lag if you're watching live. We're just staring into the screen. It's our first time going live here on YouTube. We're super excited to kind of transition and test out a different live experience here. Hopefully get some more traction here. We are Next Opportunity Social. Welcome to our channel. This is live on YouTube. My name is Rochelle Wright Wilson. I go by Rochelle. I got lots of names. I own Right Outcomes. I have a digital marketing company. I help small businesses and entrepreneurs really find ways to manage and market their business, if not on their own, or finding the right key people to help them execute that. I usually focus on one or two people who are running the show. So yeah, excited to talk today. Juan.
Yes. Hi, everyone. This is Juan Buford, broadcasting Detroit metropolitan area, CEO of JSB Business Solutions Group, B2B consultant, professional entrepreneur, and basically, I've cut my teeth helping small business owners level up, make sure they have access to the resources, make sure they have access to the information to make better decisions, scale, grow, hire, take agency over their lives and their kitchen table, and thus be able to have more agency of what transpires in their neighborhoods and communities. I believe entrepreneurship is empowerment. And while everyone cannot necessarily be an entrepreneur, does not mean everyone cannot have a more entrepreneurial mindset. And we don't need everyone. We just need more, right? We need more people who are, once again, able to take control over what transpires in their households, take control of their financial welfare, be able to do more, not just for their own families, but for others. We know small business owners employ the majority of individuals here in the United States. That's where most individuals get their first start, whether it be a job or, quite frankly, whether it be some type of entrepreneurial venture. It's usually a small endeavor. And we know it only, snowflakes turn into snowballs, right? More individuals that we can help establish themselves successfully, to be able to provide valuable services and wares to the community and uplift their environments, the more healthier our society will be. So that's the work I've been committed to. And I think that's why you and I have been able to connect on so many different levels. I know that both of that purpose driven approach to our businesses, it kind of flows through our DNA. And, as I was sharing with you before we began this broadcast, for me personally, normally we have these esoteric or intellectual topics in which we speak specifically about entrepreneurship. And I know we had the discussion earlier about, what do we talk about today, given the protests and everything that's transpiring right now. And, it would have been easy, quite frankly, not to do this, right? And I thought about that. But at the same time, I believe that the work we're doing here is also an answer. It's also a solution to what's transpiring in this country right now. And that is, of course, the obvious racial conflict that is transpiring. That's very real. Look, unless you just refuse to pay attention and you just don't want to acknowledge an inconvenient truth that this has been an issue in this country from time immemorial, then I don't know what to say for you. But we also have is a situation where this anger and frustration, not just within the African American community, but what I'm seeing in society at large, is not just about race in of itself. It's also about inequity and who wins and who loses in this country. And as I was sharing before, you know, what makes the issue so daunting, what makes it so hard to ignore, is the fact that you get the feeling, um, even if you haven't done a deep dive and looked at statistics. I mean, the eye test, I think this is one of those true situations where eye test isn't going to fail you. What we're looking at is a situation where access to capital, access to um, certain levers that you can pull to basically transcend your circumstances, to climb the socioeconomic ladder, are slowly but surely those rungs are being removed from that ladder. And we'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that that is part of the deal, right? Yes, there's anger with the treatment that have been afforded to individuals within our society by police departments. But that has been inflamed by the fact that at the end of the day, people just don't feel secure. They feel like they're being locked out of the American dream, quote unquote. Whether you believe it was a farce or not, at least there was an illusion that if I did the right things, if I worked hard, I went to school, I was of service to people in my community, I took care of my family, I did all these different things that in this country, it would work out for me, right? And what we're finding more and more and more is that there's increasing numbers of citizens, regardless of ethnicity, religion, sex, whatever, that are beginning to feel like that's not necessarily true. And that's a problem, right? It would be easy to talk about Trayvon Martin, Gardner. I don't even want to bring all these faces to image in my head right now. It's going to do one or two things. It's going to make me angry, or it's going to put me in a state where I can't even think clearly, even about the discussion we're having now. But the bottom line is, it's not just about the loss of life due to police brutality. It's about the fact that citizens, and I'll speak more specifically African American citizens, we felt like the knee has been on our necks, not just at the hands of the police, but in the banking industry, in hospitals, in educational institutions, in the higher echelons of corporate America. When you look at lending practices, whether it be in terms of acquiring capital for your business or buying a home, when you look at the incarceration rates, it's been a figuratively, metaphorical, and literal knee on the necks of individuals. And for me, that is the most daunting. I wouldn't call it a realization for me, but it's been daunting to think about the size and scope and how problematic and how deeply broken our system is in this country. And for me, it's not just angering, but it creates almost a visceral feeling of disheartenment and disenchantment.
Yeah.
And I think that's dangerous. I think that's dangerous because then you're tempted to either disengage, or if you get disengaged from the system and the possibility of things getting better, then you see some of the anger and the nihilistic behaviors. Then you see destruction. Then you see a lack of respect and regard, not only for your own welfare, but also the welfare of others, because you don't have a vested interest anymore. And I've been looking for evidence or examples of individuals really speaking to that. And I don't expect to find it on cable news. I don't expect to find it on major news channels. I just don't expect to find it there. But we need to see more of that. We need to see more of that type of discussion.
I agree. I agree. It's why I'm so, I don't know if grateful is the right word, but I'm just so fortunate that, you know, you've invited me to this platform to speak with you, and we have an opportunity to have real discussions with individuals who sort of with our name have been able to create those opportunities for themselves despite everything and despite all of those areas, you know, and those stories just ring so differently than just hearing a traditional of like, yeah, just, you know, I worked hard, I got there, it worked out, you know, and I think that those stories also ring very differently as a Detroit business and Detroiters. Those, though, they're so, these businesses and these individuals are, their passions and their why are so deeply rooted around so much, or so much heart and so much resilience, that I'm not saying that other individuals in the country don't have that, but it's like you hear that in every single one. You hear that.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's interesting having these discussions and listening to the commentary, right? Because, and I'm going to speak specifically about my experience, right? And hopefully it has some resonance with other individuals from the African American community. But, you know, for me, you grow up knowing these things transpire. Like what I'm seeing on the television set, seeing these deaths, knowing about the inequities, knowing about the rampant discrimination, you know, for me, I accepted it a long time ago. And so what you basically do, at least what I've done, is you kind of push it down to the pit of your stomach, right? Because at the end of the day, you still have to win, right? You still have to succeed. You still have to find ways to grow and become a full, whole human being and live a life of satisfaction despite the circumstances, right? And so that's what you do, right? This has just been the case since Plymouth Rock landed on us, right? You push it down your gut and you just get to work and you make the best life you can. You teach your children the things you need to teach them so they can navigate the system. You lift as you climb as best you can. And so for me, that's what it's been, right? You don't grow numb to it, but you realize you still have to win, right? And that's what you're seeing with many of the entrepreneurs here in Detroit metropolitan area. This is just kind of par for the course. What the spark was the confluence of a couple things, right? Number one, just once again, how egregious it was. And, you know, as I shared with you before, I refused to even look at the footage. I was not going to look at that video. And I finally looked at the video of that police officer with his knee on his neck like that, literally killing him. And what it did is it brought that constant stomach ache up, right? It brought it up to where it didn't feel like a stomach ache anymore. It felt like a heartache, right? It felt like a heart attack. And that's what you're seeing, right? This isn't just about what happened to Gardner, Trayvon, and so many other individuals. And I keep going back because these things have been going on, right? Emmett Till, I mean, another egregious example. It's something people need to understand. This is something that's been brewing for a long time, you know, and not just among African Americans, but people in general. For a long time, the frustration has been brewing at large, right? You know, I think about where I grew up in the west side of Detroit. And when I lived over in that period of time with my family, and I remember seeing people go to work hard, you know, people who were living honest lives, taking care of their children as best they could on minimum wage, you know, on minimum wage, but still making it work. And to see the police harassment, to see them, quite frankly, fall victim to the nihilism that exists in communities where you feel like you've been locked out, right? When people start, you know, when people choose other options to take care of their families that may not be legal, right? That don't necessarily make a positive contribution, but they're doing what they have to do to pay the rent and keep food on the table, right? And to see good people even fall victim as it relates to the ancillary damage that occurs in environments like that, right? You know, and to know that, you know, as Malcolm X said, just because you find a cat in the oven, that don't make him a biscuit. You know, just because you're born into these circumstances, just because you are dealing with these circumstances on a daily basis, that doesn't mean you're less of a human. It doesn't mean you don't have strivings, you don't have desires, that you don't want to level up, that you don't want to achieve. I think about all the talent. I think about all the intellect. I think about the work ethic of individuals whom I've seen die, and just not be able to come to a certain thing. I know some really smart brothers and sisters that fell victim to the quote unquote inequity in a systemic way in which people are kept down in this country. And I think about it all the time about how these individuals could have given so much. And that is the greatest frustration, I can say, in particularly in African American community, to know that. But it's also this country's greatest loss, right? And that's the issue, right? That right now, and this goes beyond, once again, race. We have a situation where, regardless of your ethnicity, sex, religion, et cetera, it's a situation where the losers and winners are actually being chosen.
Yeah.
Right? It's being, in some respects, it almost feels predetermined. And what has always made, I think what's always kept the anger and frustration at bay is the feeling that, okay, in spite of that, there are still a myriad of opportunities for individuals to level up. There's still a way for you to find satisfaction. There's still a way for you to improve your life. There's still a hope and a way of believing that your tomorrow can be better than your today. And you have agency over today to better what transpired yesterday. And we're beginning to see that that may not necessarily be the case for too many individuals. Something else that was very egregious in my mind was, and we just talked about this, right? What happened in DC? Here you have protesters. They're following the rules, right? They're exercising their rights as U.S. citizens. They're not being violent. They're not looting. They're not rioting. They're not doing any of that. That was so egregious what transpired, where you actually turn the state apparatus, you turn our military on citizens.
Yeah.
And as I was looking at it, I was thinking about, this is type of stuff that happens in quote unquote, which is also it takes a lot of cupidity to call another country third world. They're not on a different planet. They're on the same planet. They're in the same world. But let's just say less developed societies or less developed countries, right? That's the behavior you would expect from a dictatorship. That's the behavior you would expect from a fascist nation state, right? And to see that transpire, that is scary, right? And that is what should get everyone pause. That you can be out here articulating, you can be on the right side of the fence, you can be on the right side of history, you can be on morally correct, and it didn't matter, right? To me, that's also very scary as well.
Yeah. And then, from, as I was sharing too, that was so publicly made an example. It allowed me to stop and think of, this event in DC with, there's videos all over the place of all kinds of stuff, but that was very publicly displayed of, like, we want you all to see what we're going to do here, and
right.
want you to see that you can do everything right and it's not going to matter. And we want this country to see it, we want the world to see it. And yeah, if that didn't hit people in a different way, then I don't know. Do you think that living in your suburb, everything's all good, it's all kosher, cool, it's not gonna, like, these things don't affect you? That's unfortunate that you still feel that way, I think another thing you brought up too is how, you brought up, this is of course a long time coming as well, but we have this perfect storm of the unemployment rate right now. And you said that 50% of, and I don't remember, I don't think it was declared, America, 50% of African Americans in America are unemployed.
Yes.
And it's like, I'm still like, what? That number is so big. That is so many people. That's so many people on top of all of this, on top of, like, you're pushing people into a corner where there are no other options and choices, right? They're like, this is it. They have nothing else to do but react.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so because we throw out percentages, right? And
right.
people need to really understand what that means. That means imagine living in a neighborhood where every other household
Right.
is
That's what I was
unemployed.
thinking. It's like my neighbor doesn't have the next one. I mean, to be honestly, that is kind of true right now. I know
Yeah.
that my immediate neighbors are not working. They're
Right.
not. And some of them have already articulated now we're 10 weeks into or whatever into COVID that some of they're done. Like they're
Mhm.
gonna have to find other jobs. This isn't like I'm extremely fortunate that my husband was able to just go back to work.
Mhm.
Like this wasn't just like, oh, it's a pause. We took a breath and we're just gonna go back to the way it was. And it's like, no.
No. A lot of those jobs aren't coming back,
Mhm.
right? That should be very disconcerting to people. You have iconic businesses, you have mid-sized businesses, of course, small business owners, these restaurants, these institutions that have existed and employed people, they're not coming back.
Right.
And so individuals are waiting for the pandemic to subside, the quarantine subside, which it seems like nationwide, these things are starting to happen. But the crazy thing about it is it's not going to come, the socioeconomic consequences aren't going away anytime soon. You're going to have massive numbers of individuals who are unemployed. Because even if they go back to work, that doesn't mean the business that they go back to work for is going to be around another 2-3 months, right? They're still in the red. And you have individuals who were working these lower wage jobs who are going to be looking for jobs, and you have this influx of people who are going to be looking for jobs too. So it's going to be difficult to find traditional unemployment, right? You throw on top of that is when most people lose their jobs, they also lose their health care.
Yes. Yeah.
So imagine being in a household, you're trying to figure out how you're going to keep the utilities and lights on. You're trying to figure out how you're going to put food on the table. And then you have the added stress where, heaven forbid, your house is impacted by COVID or a flu or some type of incident or accident. Now you don't have health care. So what do you do now? Right? And that's what I'm talking about when I say these confluence of events that, quite frankly, are going to continue to drive populist anger and frustration. It's not going anywhere, right? And for me, I naturally start thinking about, okay, so what needs to happen next, right? Because the other concern I have, once again, is this fervor is going to die down, right? Some of the white hot fervor is going to begin to dissipate. And people are upset with the white hot fervor that sometimes results in violence, right? And anger being expressed. Before I move on, what I would counter those individuals is you weren't hearing us when we were being peaceful. When Colin Kaepernick took a knee, that was peaceful protest.
Right.
You didn't hear that, right? That wasn't, you weren't willing to accept that. So people had to turn up for you to finally see what's transpiring. But on the flip side of that, that white hot anger is going to subside, right? Cooler heads, quote unquote, are going to start to prevail. Just like every other movement that's transpired in this country. Okay. And the other thing that concerns me is, where is the agenda? Where are the things that we're going to say, look, we're going to address A, B, C, and D to right the wrongs? And these things won't right hundreds, decades and centuries of oppression and violence and disenfranchisement. But what are the things we can do that will be a good start to begin to right these wrongs?
Yeah.
That's the other thing that I find very, very, very disconcerting, that I don't see a cogent agenda on it. Well, we're not going to get it on national level. Okay. Now with this current president, it's not going to happen. And I say that not because I care Democratic, Republican, I care less. I'm just looking for smart people who actually care about the welfare, everyday citizens come on the agenda, and it's not happening on a national level. But you know what? Amidst the anger, it's not happening, at least as far as where the eye can see, it's not happening on a local level either. And for me, that's very scary, right? It's very scary. And so, once again, my mind, that's where it starts going, right? And I ticked off some of these things in the beginning. What I'd like to see and what I think some of the problems, what will solve a lot of the problems is, number one, we need to take a good hard look at how capital is accessed in this country and who has access to that capital. And what are the determinants of that access, right? Whether it be lending for entrepreneurial endeavors and enterprise, whether it be how we look at lending and access to housing. When we look at the disparities, what happens in our medical system. I mean, a statistic that has been around for a long time that I think is very daunting. And I mean, it's absurd. I mean, that, ebony and brown children, when you look at infant mortality rates, they are double that of everyone else. That's scary.
Yeah.
That's scary. That's something that needs to be addressed, right? There's something systemically wrong with that. Once again, when I think about the incarceration rates, there's been a pandemic going on in the African American community for a long time. The bottom line is we have a society right now that is more effective at producing felons than producing college graduates. We're more effective at producing people carrying around misdemeanors than skilled trades, right? These things are problematic. These things need to be addressed. There needs to be some serious look at what we're doing. Because I'm not just saying just in terms of African American, I'm talking about in general. Our society has become much more effective at locking people away than ensuring that people have access to the tools that they need to level up, and particularly in urban environments. I remember growing up that most men that I knew had some type of skilled trade. It was part of the schooling. It was part of what it meant to grow up and become an adult. You were going to learn a skilled trade in addition to whatever other academic credentials you were going to earn, right? It's a big deal. You don't find the skilled trades in schools in urban areas anymore. That's problematic. That needs to be addressed. There needs to be a greater confluence of resources directed at individuals who come out of jail, who come out of prison. Because they're going to have to find, if you look at the increasing numbers in which individuals are being incarcerated in jail, you're talking about millions of people who are going to be introduced to society on a yearly basis. And what do you do with those individuals, right? Particularly those who want to do right, who don't want to fall back into terrible recidivism rates, right? What are we doing as a society to ensure that we address that? And then I'm going to end, at least off the top of my head right now, I'm going to end where I began. And I just firmly believe that the insidious behavior of some police officers, but I would say even of the policing profession, right? Because in order for that type of stuff to behave, other people have to be there watching it and observing it, right? There needs to be space, there needs to be oxygen for that behavior and for that mindset to exist. I think about the Montgomery bus boycotts as a perfect example, right? The Montgomery bus boycotts were not successful because it was the right thing to do. The Montgomery bus boycotts were effective because it cost the city money, right? That boycott hurt business. It was damaging systemically. And the bottom line is those individuals in Montgomery realized, okay, we have to do something about this or the entire system's going to fail. Households, communities are going to fail as a result of this bus boycott. We can't have this, right? It was because there was a monetary consequence.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe that this country and that police departments in particular are not capable of self-reforming. That the only way to correct the situation is to make the costs so painful, to make the expense so high that people just say, no, if I pull this trigger, if I murder this person, not only do I lose my livelihood, but my comrades lose their livelihoods as well, right? I think the laws need to change in such a way where if that happens, no, it's not the cities to get penalized, it's not the states to get penalized, but no, the actual police department, the unions, those pensions, you have to pay out of that fund. And I guarantee you that will immediately bring about the change that we're looking for. So, those are the things on top of my head, systemically, but also look, being a professional that navigates certain environments. You know, I see this word being termed allies, right? Allies. What I would encourage allies to consider is this: it's not just a physical need. You know, how many African Americans do you do business with, right? To the allies. There is an overabundance of African Americans in the medical industry. Okay, there's an overabundance of African American talent in the tax and accounting industry. There's an overabundance of African Americans in the legal industry. There's an overabundance of highly skilled, highly trained, very well educated professionals and entrepreneurs. And the question I would pose is, why aren't you doing business with them? Mm-hmm. Right? Because that's an economic need, right? For other African American small business owners who are just as effective, deliver incredible products and services. Are you utilizing them as vendors, right? And your hiring and firing practices, right? In African American community, there's a saying: last hired and first fired, right? That's what drew me to entrepreneurship. I had no toleration for it. I couldn't tolerate it. I wasn't going to sit and take orders from some Caucasian individual when I know I'm better educated. I know I work harder. I know I'm more skilled, more talented. And I wasn't going to be put in a situation where somebody, just because of the complexion of my skin and because they can't see past that, can make decisions about whether or not I can take care of my family. I just had no toleration for that. And I will willingly admit that is a lot of what drew me and pushed me into entrepreneurship as well. I just didn't have a tolerance for it, right? But for those individuals who are in position to hire and fire and make those type of decisions, I would encourage them to do a deep dive internally themselves and ask themselves, how many times did they deny someone an opportunity? How many times did they not recognize their skill, their talent, refuse to acknowledge their leadership ability simply because of their complexion and fears and anxieties that you may have, right? James Baldwin talked about this. I'm not a huge fan of Van Jones. I'll say it out loud. I've never been a huge fan of him, but he said something that was very important, right? And I don't judge a book by the cover. Knowledge doesn't discriminate. It can come from anyone. The bottom line is, he made a point. I think he was being interviewed by, was that Conan? I think that was by Conan. And he talked about this. He said the biggest fear, or the most destructive force in our society right now, is not the overt racist, right? It's not the wolf that's showing his teeth. And the wolf doesn't want you there, to quote Malcolm X, right? It's the fox.
Right.
It's the fox that's smiling, that's grinning, that's literally going to lunch with you. The fox that is occasionally at a soup kitchen in your neighborhood. The fox that is maybe has gone to a barbecue with you, but that person is housing a belief system, or they're housing a perspective that when they are in positions to make certain decisions that can make an impact on another person's life, that these prejudicial inclinations or leanings are finding expression in them. And I would encourage individuals to reflect on that for a moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think about within just my own circle and my own family, and I think about the people I associate with, and I would never, for so many, sit here and be like, there's a problem here, there's a problem there, or you have a problem, because but this event has quite brought to light and made it very apparent to me who those foxes are in my own circle. And that certainly hit me like a lot harder than I expected. Mm-hmm. I wasn't even prepared to realize that, I've thought a lot and very carefully myself of, what African Americans am I working with? What people of color am I introducing into myself? Who am I going out of my way to make sure that my world is diverse all the time? And And I've also thought too of just like, especially in my world or an entrepreneurial world, so much of what we do is referral based, right? We look to our circle to refer us to other individuals who are professional or whatever, because we want efficiency, we want to get it done right, we want to, we want the best if we can get it right. And I've thought about too of just like something that I've never really questioned of like, why do I not get referred Black individuals? And I would encourage my white people to ask themselves that as well. Why are you not being referred Black individuals normally? Now I see quite an abundance of it on Instagram right now over the next, and probably will over the next few weeks. Why were we not seeing that before? Why were we making an active choice to not even question why we weren't seeing that before? So I think I always want to believe that, especially in Detroit, that it's very difficult. You have to almost go out of your way a little bit to not work with African Americans in Detroit, but there are a lot of people who do. Right? And that is surprising to me sometimes, of like that people just, I don't know how you can live here and work here and your world still not be diverse, right? But even as I like to think my world is diverse, but it's not as diverse as it should be, could be, and will be.
Well, so I think two things when I hear that. And once again, it just goes back to what I was taught, and be transparent with you is what I'm going to teach my children, right? I know because there are preconceived notions about who I am, the type of person I am, and the level of talent, intellect that I bring to the table, that I know my complexion plays a role in that, right? And so I've always been taught, and I'm going to teach my children, and I teach anyone that comes underneath my tutelage, that, has an ebony complexion, that look, you are going to have to work twice as hard. You are going to have to be willing to give twice that of your competitor who does not share your complexion. And there's no point crying and whining about it. It's just the reality of the matter. I know that, right? Because if you don't, my experience has been, since we're going to talk about Detroit and operating in Detroit Metro, it's very easy, right? It's very easy. Yeah, it's very easy. Not because oftentimes African Americans are just kind of treated like the furniture, right? We're kind of treated like a plant or part of the urban infrastructure, right? I'm living an urban life because there are African Americans around me. But if you're not doing business with them, if you're not engaging with them, if you're not talking to them on a more intimate level, they're just being treated like furniture. And that's exactly what's transpiring. It's very easy for that to happen. But here's the other thing too. And, this is a conversation that I think needs to happen in the community, right? Because what you do have is a disparity in terms of African American men and women. And this is for African American women, some significant strides have been made, but discrimination is still there. But still, there's still a paucity of individuals who are ready and prepared to compete, right? And I don't want to be flippant about that, right? I don't want to ignore that. That is the other side of the fence, that because of the inequities, because of what has transpired historically, and the scab has been ripped off the wounds, you are going to have another generation of African American women and men who are not prepared for the jobs and the opportunities of tomorrow. That's a very real issue too, and that's got to be addressed quick, fast, in a hurry, right? You're going to have a situation where, and I'm always reluctant to say this because it's easier to turn into the circular firing squad and to be overcritical, right, in situations like this. But nevertheless, there hasn't been the type of leadership within the African American community to say, look, there are just certain things that we're not going to tolerate from each other, right? there's a certain degree of excellence or expertise. I was thinking about, I've been reading a lot of literature and watching a lot of videographies and documentaries, Eye on the Prize, things like that. And I remember, I think it was Stokely Carmichael, I might be wrong, but I think it was Stokely Carmichael, and I'm paraphrasing, he basically said, look, if you're going to be a garbage truck driver, be the best garbage truck driver ever. If you're going to be a street sweeper, be the best street sweeper ever. If you're going to be an attorney, be the best attorney ever. If you're going to be anything, be the best at what you can be. And we need to have an internal conversation about what that means and reinstilling that in our community, in our DNA, to know that we have to be the best. You know, just wanting to participate and just wanting to have an opportunity in itself is not enough, right? We have to do the work internally to make sure that this next generation that's coming up is equipped with all the resources, mindsets, philosophies, and tools that are at their disposal to get out here and compete. Because just like in 2008, you know, one of the biggest legacies of what transpired in 2008 was the fact, in Detroit in particular, I remember 2008 vividly. You had people literally leaving their keys on the porch. Now, I ain't just talking African-American, I'm talking about just period. But definitely with an African-American, you had people leaving their keys on the porch. You had a lot of wealth disappear, be eviscerated, because the federal government did not respond appropriately to what's going on in the community. And unfortunately, because of what just transpired, that's going to be exacerbated. Once again, 50% unemployment within the African-American community or somewhere thereof. And of course, if it's that high nationwide, I know in Detroit, oh my, right? So we're gonna have to act very quickly. We're gonna have to act, I mean, we're gonna have to act with like gazelle running from lion speed to find a way to repurpose and retool a system to put individuals back to work and give them opportunities to level up, right? That's going to become so important over the next 6 months, or the next 12 months, for the next 2 years, because a lot of wealth has been, it's gone. It's gone. It's amazing to think about it, but that's a lot of heavy lifting that has to be done. You know, as an entrepreneur, something else that I think about, and I say this all the time, money doesn't disappear, it changes hands, right? So we need not get it twisted either. There are a lot of individuals who are actually doing very well during this pandemic. There are individuals who are conducting commerce, they're getting business done, they're leveling up, they're actually building wealth during this period, right? And, you know, critical thought has to be taken into account. Well, how do you get on that side of the fence, right? How do you equip people with the means to accomplish those goals, right? And to have that type of success during a period like this. You know, I, for one, I just firmly believe in entrepreneurship. You already know that's the thing that drives me. I don't think it's the answer to everything, but quite frankly, I think it's the answer to a lot of what ails communities. This country, at the end of the day, was founded on entrepreneurship. That's what it was founded on, right? No taxation about representation, and the ability for individuals to take their hands, take a plow, dig it into the soil, and create something for themselves, right? We need, that's what's necessary. You know, if I'm the mayor of Detroit, if I'm the governor of Michigan, I'm immediately critically thinking about how can I introduce skilled trades back into these communities? Because not everyone's going to go to college, right? What can I do to make access? We can't control whether or not people take advantage of them. That's a different discussion for another time. But what can we do to make access, make these levers of progress and the ability to level up and take care of? So how can we make these resources more accessible? And that's first and foremost on my mind right now, more than anything.
I think too that even over the past, I don't know, even say 10 years, but especially now, especially with the pandemic, like the way education is distributed changed. The way, like the idea of just going to college has been shaky, I'd say, the past few years anyway, because of just like, is it necessary for you to take on that debt to do what you need to do? And I have a degree. I went to college. I don't regret doing that, but was it necessary for me to go there and do all that to do what I'm doing now? Not even a little bit. And it's not. I think we have overemphasized. In certain careers, that's what you need to do. But the idea of education that has to be only institutionalized in this way, right, and distributed this way. I mean, I am hopeful that that is shifting rapidly because of the reality of if you don't have a job to go back to, you can't afford to go to college to get that education towards whatever was told to you that you have to have this degree around.
Right.
Then yes, I would hope, and I hope that this immediate need of we have to rethink this and we have to readjust, and that I would hope that business owners and entrepreneurs who are in a position who may have not been educators, right, or especially if you're someone in a skill trade, if you see that, I used to hear that a lot when I was doing resume writing of skill trade people, especially here in Detroit, who are frustrated with the younger generation. They don't want to work. They don't want to work. They don't want to learn this. They don't want to get their hands dirty. They don't want to have to work that hard. I don't believe that at all. I believe that this was not even presented to them as an option, so they don't even know how to wrap their head around it. They don't know how, they don't understand what, and you're just getting defensive, like as that business owner, you're just getting defensive because you were handed that. I think about my dad who went to Cass Tech. He went to Cass Tech and graduated with an aeronautical certificate. That was it. He was done. He has worked on planes his entire life.
Yep.
And that was it, right? And all of his friends got their certificate of this and this and this and this, and it was they were all skill trades, right? And but then I see even that generation get frustrated with the next one. It's like because the next generation was told you got to go to college and you got to get a fancy piece of paper that now you're going to then what? How are you going to get this? What are you going to do after that? So I agree. It really needs to be restructured. My hope is that with technology and things that have progressed, that can happen faster, that can happen better, that it result in better jobs. Like I agree to to a certain extent, even if you do have a traditional 9-to-5 job, you have to have an entrepreneurial mindset because you have to take your life in your own hands. Like you have to, like you cannot rely on this employer to carry you through, no matter how helpful they may be. You know, you got to think about the whole picture in that way for yourself.
Yeah, I mean there was a implicit contract, right? An agreement that was made and then taught. You go to school, you make good grades, you work very hard, you bring value to a company, and you retire, and there's some type of pension or there's something waiting for you, right? When you can no longer drag your behind out of bed and go to work, right? And that contract was broken a long time ago. Right. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize that, right? I tell people all the time, this isn't your granddaddy's economy. If you still believe in job security, you might as well believe in the tooth fairy. You know, it just doesn't work that way.
It's funny you mentioned that though, because I think I've thought about so many of these things of how like we're 100 years in and so many things happened like 100 years ago. We talk about the Great Depression, we talk about all this stuff like that. And I think about my grandfather and how that's what he believed. He's like, no one's going to carry this for you. I got to do this myself. Right. Of just like, no one's going to give you a job. You got to make this.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of education that needs to take place in terms of people understanding money and people understanding value proposition and the relationship between the two. That's just not happening right now. You know, it was funny. I had an interesting conversation with the team a couple of days ago. And, you know, I talked to them about how, look, I need you to analyze and look at this. When you go out to acquire a job, whether someone's paying you 30, 50, 75, 100K per year, whatever the case may be, when they hire you, understand that at the outset, you're not worth that money. You haven't done anything. You haven't brought any value to that company, right? They're paying you that 30, that 50, that 60K, anticipating that they're going to get that money back out of you, right? So if you're accustomed to that mode of thinking, though, I'm going to go get this job, I'm going to get paid 30 to 50K, and you don't understand the game, you don't understand what's going on, you need to understand that. And hopefully people are listening to this loud and clear. Entrepreneurs get this, but for the non-entrepreneur, those who are considering entrepreneurs, understand this. When you get that first paycheck, you really haven't earned it yet, right? There's orientation, there's training, there's the anticipation that you have a work ethic, and that over the course of the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to become worth the money is being paid. But what ends up happening is by your 4th, 5th, and 6th year, you become extremely proficient at that job. And the value you're bringing to the company is much more than what they're compensating. So you're expecting a raise. But what's going on in the economy now is by the time you've been on a job for 6, 7 years, there is another generation of workers coming up behind you that will do that same job for less money than what you're demanding. The companies know they can pay them less money because of that dynamic that I just spoke to. And so you look up in your 6th, 7th year, and magically the company finds a way to downsize or move you up out of there, right? One way or the other. So you're on to the next job and you repeat the same cycle. Well, you do that 7 times. I mean, you do that 7-year stretch, 3, 4 different times, you look up in your 40s and your 50s. Now you're this highly skilled, highly experienced individual in the job market looking for gainful work or employment, and your value is so high that companies don't want to hire you anymore, right? That's what's going on.
Yeah.
When you are an entrepreneur, it's the exact opposite, right? You haven't brought value, so you're not getting paid anything. You have to learn the skills. You have to learn the trade. You have to become informed. In the beginning, you're doing a lot of things that you don't get paid for. So later on, you can be compensated for things you no longer have to do, right? And so it's an opposite arc, right? In the beginning, you're getting paid pennies, nothing. But on the tail end, over the course of time, you've built so much value, particularly if you're treating people right, and operating a business, really bringing value to people's lives. And you throw that caveat in, right? You're not out here just exploiting people, trying to make a quick buck. You don't see people's transactions, but you're building relationships. But you'll look up and you've created a type of financial security because of the value prop that you're bringing to people's lives, right? So you don't have those same concerns. That's something that needs to be taught, right? You're not going to be taught this in high school. No one's going to teach you this in college. It's not going to happen, right? I remember, it feels like eons ago when I was an investment advisor. And I remember people would come into my office and I remember thinking to myself, this person's 45, 50 years of age. They have about $200,000, $300,000 saved in a 401k. They're working this gig or they're in transition to another gig. And I'm looking at them and I know that they don't know that I know that they probably have another 20 years of tread left on the tires before the bottom line is they're going to start taking pay cuts. The raises aren't going to come anymore. Matter of fact, age discrimination is getting ready to start taking place, regardless of what your background is. And if you've only had $200,000 to $300,000 saved in your 401k, you're going to need to grow that money to at least $1 million or 1.5 million, so you can live 65, 70 until you die 85, 90 years of age if you're blessed to live that long. And I remember that is part of what pushed me out of being an investment advisor, because I was sitting down in front of these families. This was a typical client, typical family that I'm dealing with, right? Of course, I had higher income earners and entrepreneurs that were in a different place, but the majority of people who was walking to my office, that was them. And they're 40, 45, 50 years of age. And I had to tell some real uncomfortable truths. And I had to let them know there's no magic wand here. There's no magical investment. There's no magic here. And can you imagine? I mean, this was 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago when I was having these conversations. I can't imagine being in that position right now where you're 45, 50 years of age. This pandemic just wiped you out. You may lose your home. You've lost your job. You have to retool. If you have assets, you're spending down your assets right now to survive this period of time. And you only have another 10, 15 years to make up all this wealth that's been lost.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I start thinking about the fact that even those individuals whom I were talking to, they were privileged, right? Most people are only earning about $30,000 to $40,000 a year. So they're already at the precipice right? They're already check to check, hand to mouth. They're already one incident away um, from catastrophe, right? And then I start thinking about, once again, see, this stuff is all interrelated. And this, if people want to understand where the anger and frustration is coming from, and then when you look at the African American community, you have all the stuff jumbled on top of it. And then you have a situation where 1 out of 4 households in some communities, the breadwinner is sitting in a jail cell somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
When they come out 3-4 months later, the house is gone, the car is gone, they don't have a cell phone, you know, the family's dispersed. This is what's been going on in these communities. And they say, you know, when America catches the cold, the African American community catches the flu, right? We're kind of like canary in the mine, right? And so once again, when I start thinking about these situations in the African American community, I start thinking about society at large. This conversation that we're having is coming to a neighborhood near you. You're not immune from this, right? You're not immune. But anyway, I start once again thinking about what are the solutions, right? I think about personally the most important thing I can do is to, number one, be successful, to win, put myself in position where I have the means and the wherewithal to hold down the family, right? If you can't hold down your family, you can't, a sinking ship can't save another sinking ship, right? And then I start thinking about, okay, now that I've righted the ship, what can I do to help other people right their ship, right? What can I do to influence other individuals to, I don't know any words to say it right now. I'm just psychologically, emotionally, I'm not at a place to, but you know, how can you influence people to do the right thing?
Yeah.
Right, do the right thing. And how do I psychologically put myself at a place where I don't commit the same offense, right? Where I judge a person based on their complexion, I judge a person based on their zip code, I judge a person based on the uniform that they're wearing, as opposed to seeing them as a human being, right? And giving people the opportunity to be human, right? Giving people the benefit of the doubt. And that's tough right now, but I know I can get there, and I know that's what I'm keenly focused on. And I mean, I would like to think that's what it is to be human, right?
Yeah.
To that's what bonds us all here as citizens in this country. That's what makes us different in some respects, right? That at the end of the day, we want to take care of our families, but there's also this social contract that's been broken that I hope can be restored, that we also want to see our fellow neighbor level up to as well, that a rising tide lifts all ships. So regardless of what your complexion is, regardless of what your socioeconomic class or stratus or sex or sexual orientation, whatever, at the end of the day, we should all want to see everyone level up, because together, everyone achieves more, right? You know, and maybe that's a fuzzy way to kind of end this broadcast, but I would hope that society at large will begin to rebuild that social contract with each other. So.
Me too. Well, the time that traveling and we having this conversation. I do want to let people know we're watching this video on our first one for our YouTube channel.
Yes.
But we have had many conversations before this one. They will be uploaded in the coming weeks so that you can watch them. They've happened for weeks now. Like, you know, for a while. And we also have incredible guests that are coming in the coming weeks to speak on a variety of different topics. I'm excited to see where this evolves with Next Opportunity Social and what we're going to be able to create and build and provide that resource for as many individuals that can take advantage of it.
And the piggyback off that, for those who listen to this broadcast, the best thing about what we do is you, right? If you didn't know before, hopefully you know now that you have two servant individuals here. And at the end of the day, all we want to do is provide the content, soul food, whether it be esoteric or whether it be general, right? We want to make sure you have the tools and information you need to level up and become more effective and live lives of satisfaction, personally, financially, spiritually, materially, every which way you can think of. So your feedback is so important to us. So any commentary, I mean, even criticism. Look, we eat those like Skittles.
Yes.
It's okay, right?
Yes.
We accept it all. So any feedback that can be offered, any suggestions that can be offered, any individuals, particularly other entrepreneurs that you feel like a spotlight should be shown on them, we're more than happy to accommodate and serve. So please do give us your feedback.
Thank you again.